So, you know, I couldn't say it back there like, yeah, show loyalty, you know. You know who is doing it right? You approval. I need them. Yeah. Hey, how are you doing? So,
Give me these. Yeah, yo, man. Good. Good to see you.
How's it going, everyone?
That's not for you.
Thought you guys would be hungry. Yeah, no, I told him it was cool. I was waving him down. He said that he saw me. Guess everyone's gonna have to dry mouth, huh?
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Keith.
Oh, no problem.
You want me to run through?
Whatever you are. Not too many people showing up, I guess. We had like 35 people RSVP. Yeah.
Did you move from here again?
Yeah.
Where you at?
I'm out in Gainesville.
Nice.
That's where I'm from.
I'm out in Gainesville, but the company I work for is in New York and DC.
Good. So I was last month at West Park.
Yeah.
CJ? Yeah. Good deal.
So, man, how's it going, man? Cool.
Hey, CJ, I see you sitting there, right?
cool, man.
So we're talking about your money back. How you doing to do it on mic? Sorry?
Jose.
Jose? Okay. Great, nice to meet you guys. There's a young lady across. You're the only one I don't know now. You travel with Josh? Very good.
I paid her to travel with me. It's cool.
I've got one too.
Yeah.
Going for a quick though.
Are we ready, I guess? I don't know. Okay.
Can we turn off the light?
Room through Microsoft.
Okay, so I take it this is everybody then? Cool. Okay, so I'd say about a couple weeks ago, probably at the beginning of this month, CJ contacted me. He's like, hey, you want to do something? I was like, I'm always up to do something. And then we started at OneSpark. That's how OneSpark started. And we presented at OneSpark and everything. And then he called me up and he was like, hey, you want to do Jax UX? I'm like, I haven't been to Jax UX in like 1 to 2 years. But sure, why not? Sounds awesome. So basically the gist of my talk is called Demystifying Your Process. Just because I feel that whenever I talk to, let's say, a stakeholder or maybe even project managers, a lot of project managers that grandfather in a little bit that don't understand a lot about Scrum and things like this, they don't know the details of user experience. They know that the company wants it, especially when you freelance into user experience. People know they want this because they keep hearing user experience, user experience, user experience. They don't know what it is, but they know they want it. So, what was it? It was early 2014. I wrote this drunken rant called a UX manifesto. CJ contacted me. He was like, yeah, we just need you to put your entire life's work into a white paper. I said, challenge accepted. So many bourbons later and a typewriter and everything, no sleep whatsoever, I came up with this thing, and it outlines my process from A to Z and like what I feel user experience is, where the future of the industry might be going as I see it, and then just really trying to put it sort of at like a 6th grade reading level. So this way it's more approachable, people can understand it a little better. And it's not, it's not boisterous or anything. So when you're a user experience professional, I like to say professional architect, just because number one, we happen to do a lot of things. And it's just not, it's not particular to design. We do information architecture, research, and you can have entire teams that do this, and you could be that one person on this team of user experience professionals. But just from my background, freelancing, going out and doing contract work and everything, you're this one person, and all these things have to happen around you. So, I explain that, part of you see the process in there. I included tacos in my process, just because they are an excellent thing for your process. Funds, things about gamification, design. My capacity where I work right now, I work on the content team. And they wanted me specifically to help in the content and bring my user experience background to that content. So now we work in information security, but we do phishing education. So now I'm doing training videos and animations and putting out education resources, infographics, and different things like this based on all of the research that we have. So Donnie Guy, the user experience manager at Zappos, this is one of the things I definitely want to talk about tonight is, as a designer or professional, no person is an island. Design happens in teams. It happens in groups. There's many different voices to a design. So we call it the usual suspects. Unfortunately, in my case, it's me, myself, and I. So we have yourself, if you're working with a researcher or business analyst, and then your stakeholder. In corporate settings, BAs and UX tend to get, work hand in hand. So really quick show of hands, who works in a corporate environment doing design work? Okay. Who works freelance?
You just get called on doing that.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's another one of the reasons I wrote the manifesto, is because I want it to be able to work whether you're freelance and take these sort of amalgamation of agile and lean and bring them into the corporate so you can fit within that agile development cycle. So you have deliverables and things like this, but you can still go back out on your own, use these same principles when you're freelancing. So you don't get bogged down like, oh, I have 38 design comps and things like this. So agile or lean. The way that I look at it, as long as you're identifying and solving the user's problems instead of releasing just awesome features, that's definitely one thing you have to concern yourself with. The next thing is gaining the user stakeholder validation and feedback very, very early on. So this way, you're automatically sort of iterative designing their feedback into the designs as you go on. So it's part of the prototyping cycle. And then you go into using collaborative design to your advantage. We'll talk more about that in the latter slides. Collaborative design is a lot different than design by committee. Design by committee is, more often than not, you feel like you're the one designer on the team, and then you just showcase your design to maybe somebody, and they're like, oh, we don't like it. It's not very collaborative. It's a one-sided feedback track and everything going on. Collaborative design has everybody sort of take a stake in that design, have their input from very early on in the design. And using the only tools and skill sets necessary to meet the goals. So this basically, I say when I do a project, I like wireframing just because I find it very calming. It's my Zen moment to myself. But I don't create bloated documents with wireframes. That's why I like interactive wireframing tools like Balsamic or Mockflow or things like this, so I can invite people that are stakeholders in that project in to take a look at it. They can collaborate and share things like this. And if I do any design work on a project, depending on the size of the project and the budget, I usually only do maybe 1, 2, or 3 design comps. And that's usually a page that has the general user interface elements and then like forum elements and things like this so they can visually see what's happening. You can also rapid prototype from the wireframes as well if you already have a design in mind. And with rapid prototyping, that gives you a little more of an advantage, especially with the frameworks that we have out there like Bootstrap and just blank. A Foundation, Bootstrap and Foundation, and things like that. So you could rapidly prototype these designs up and then get that iterative design feedback as you're prototyping. So as you're going through this and you're getting that iterative feedback, you're actually, all together as a team, you're working on that project. Like I said, you'll be fine. Honestly, I learned very on not to freak out about things. I have OCD. I'm quite the perfectionist. You learn very on just to let it go, and you know, it's all going to work out in the end. It's a fluid sort of system. I get feedback. That's fine. I think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I could sit here and run through the office with a button above my head, screaming that it's the best thing I've ever designed in the world. But you know what? It could be, it couldn't be, based on stakeholder feedback, user feedback. If they can't find the button anywhere, then what use is it going to be to that overall project? So all of this is you're designing these toward the product, and that's your goal, is you want to user-center that product design. So going back to Agile or Lean, I've worked in Agile and I've done Lean UX, and I think they sort of both go hand in hand. There's no, in my opinion, there's no such thing as Agile UX. You sort of incorporate more of a Lean UX approach when you work in the Agile development environment, because Agile does not cater to designers. You know, like, they're not going to slate me 2 or 3 days to go around, look for inspiration, go outside, take a walk. That'd be great. I'm not going to lie. Yes.
Josh, when you specifically talk Lean from an operational process standpoint, I mean, can you define it, not project by project, but just in a general sense?
Yeah, Lean is basically you're stripping away all of the things that don't need to take place. So I'm actually going to go more into that in the latter slides. And honestly, I think some time ago I interviewed here at PaceMan, and oddly enough, I remember doing a whiteboarding session with everybody. And that's our next thing, is group whiteboarding. Who's excited about that? I love whiteboarding. It's amazing. Here's why. You got to round up a team. You know, you have to have the people that are interested, have stake in that project. So you have your domain owner, your requirements owner, the data provider, your analyst, your technology owner. The technology owner is somebody from the development side that's actually going to be like, we can do this, we can't do this, we can make this happen, and things like this. And this is where, you know, the project manager comes in and the scrum master. We talk about time and things like this. So it's really getting everybody involved in the design. And for 2 reasons, this is 2 big reasons, and I talked about this earlier, was it allows everyone to communicate the ideas in a forum type setting. So if I'm designing something, it's going to be based off of feedback that we get from everybody. Now granted, I've been doing this for a while, and I'm like, yeah, this is a general practice, this is a best practice, and there's a reason they're conventions, because they work well. But how can we work inside a convention if we have to? Or, you know, what if we talk about breaking one of those conventions? What are we going to do to break that convention? And that's a great time to talk about that, because everybody's there. And it gives every person on the team a stake in the design. So this means that the technology owner and the product or business owner and everybody that has a stake knows from the get-go what's going into the design. And you could take this and take this right here and go right to prototyping, rapid prototyping the product. Teamwork. So
You got a gorilla in the shop.
yeah, it's a gorilla and a shark high-fiving, because why not?
In the air.
In the air.
Explosions.
There was
There's
explosions.
electrical explosion.
There was metal guitar. A lot of fun was had. This was put together at 3 a.m. But I mean,
Was this captured live?
yes. I went out into the ocean and I had a gorilla over one shoulder. But I mean, this is what it's really talking about, like demystifying your process. Because one of the things that I love to do is when I meet other user experience professionals, I love seeing their notebooks, because that's really the scenes behind the scenes. And like, oh, you were doing this, you were doing that. I've done many occasions where I've gone on like job interviews and things, and the designer will like hand me your notebook, and they'll pilfer through your notebook to get a better idea of what you're bringing to the table, because that's going to tell more about you. Yes.
When you say notebook, are you talking about your laptop?
No. I tend to go everywhere with a notebook. You can't beat paper and pencil, and and I think in the description of the meetup, we talked about it being like some sort of weird alchemical sequence or secret and thing. It's really not. It's just my notes. If I can decipher them, awesome. I don't care if anybody else can. I've got weird stuff in here. I mean, come on, sharks high-fiving gorillas. I've got pictures of fish fighting spam emails, but it makes sense to me, and that's all that matters. But at the same time, like I said, I love seeing other people's notebooks. It's so much fun. I thought about starting a blog just about that, where I talk to other designers, and they just share pages out of their notebooks if they can, because I know some projects that people are under NDAs, they can't talk about certain things, stuff like that. But the stuff you can share is your notebook stuff, unless it pertains to that client. And it's open communication is that big thing in Agile or Lean. What we're doing now with work is I'm trying to implement like a Lean UX approach, but we have some hurdles just because 46% of our workforce is remote. So a lot of my team, I don't see them face to face, but we have stand-ups every morning. We Skype communicate, things like this, but we're still doing that Lean approach where, hey, I came up with this really cool feature. I've wireframed it really quick, or I've made a sketch of it and scanned it and threw it in. And then everybody has input in on it. So one of the features I've been working on was like a language selector. Currently, what they had was just a block of text links that would hover above the page. And I was like, it works, it's functional, but how can we make it more usable? How can we get them more engaged with that other than having the browser automatically change it to that browser language? So we implemented a drop-down box. So now it has, and there was many different design iterations in the drop-down box, where I had just like an orange drop-down box with 2 icons. And then you click it, and it changes the title or label of the button to the name of that language or whatever. And we tested it, and as far as testing goes, in situations like that, there's not a large amount of testing, but we do get user feedback from like managed services and stuff like that. So we take that feedback, and they're like, it's an awesome feature. I didn't know we had it. And I even got some feedback, because I remember being on a phone call for 3 hours training them how to implement this and a lot of our things that we put out. And some people were like, oh, I didn't know that existed. I was like, oh, I didn't know you weren't paying attention. So, and that's the thing, is you really have to figure out a way to grab people's attention at the same time. So with that drop down, one of the biggest things that came back is we didn't have enough context. It was great that it changed to the language, and the education would change based on the native browser language. But there wasn't really anything to, let's say, promote that language selector, because they have to implement that through HTML and CSS. So one of the things we did is we added context. We added context to the language selector. So now the language selector has a paragraph next to it that says, this page is currently translated in Siswati. And then now the label on the button says translate to in that native language, as well as that string of text. So if the user has simplified Chinese as their native browser language, it automatically comes up as simplified Chinese, giving them the option to translate into 12 different languages. And then now, because it's progressed so far, that language selector is a fallback method in case the used language doesn't catch, something's weird, I think right now Firefox is the bane of my existence. Chrome, of course, is always glorious. Everything works gorgeously in Chrome. But it gives you an insight into that iterative design process in Lean UX, because it didn't go from here's a bunch of visual designs that I have. We talked about it. It was sketched out. It was prototyped. I was done. So that's, I mean, the biggest thing with that is getting the managed services on board. Of course, with anything is trying to get people behind it now, because it's been a regime change as far as how the languages are served, and they've gotten so used to one method, and it's the easiest method. It's a bunch of text links at the top, but now it's like, oh, here's the language selector. It's just simple drop down, and you have to put so many languages on the one page to change the language. Then I also came up with an option to keep the text links up at the top just to appease everybody, but I made them a little more design friendly. So now it's a nice little area up at the top, and they can just click the language they want. So now, that also gives you another peek into alternate design ideas and different things that we can play with. And right now we're testing both ideas to see which one works a little better and things like that. But I'm partial to the language selector drop-down method, just because I spent like 3 days on it. And I also gave them a little talk about user experience and the colors I chose, and and that's another thing with the iterative Lean UX process, is you don't have to explain your decisions, because that's going to happen when you're doing these group sessions, because everybody's going to be involved. They know the decisions behind the choices that you make, and that's how you demystify your process. Oh crap, that was really short.
That's pretty good though.
Thank you. But sharks and gorillas high-fiving. Yeah.
More Q&A time.
Yes, Q&A. If anybody has any questions, hate mail, concerns.
You
Yes.
mentioned about Balsamic and Mockflow.
Mockflow runs on, I like to call it the poor man's Balsamic now, that Balsamic stepped up their game. I preferred Mockflow. It runs Adobe Air, so it's an uploaded desktop application. You can run anywhere. I prefer it because I like clean layout. One of the things is sketch layouts versus clean layouts, and sometimes if you go to a client that doesn't really understand that, they're going to be like, well, why does my website look all sketchy? Well, that's not your website. That's the wireframes for the design. Then, oh, is this my website? It's so clean. And I'm like, no, this isn't the website. We're still looking at the wireframes. So I just prefer to use those wireframes, and then I'll have them in PowerPoints and stuff like that, but I'll have them as print handouts as well. So there's still that form of documentation there somewhat. Balsamic, they give you both the option to do sketchy and straight wireframes as well, but they have a lot of integrations into that software, and it really exists as somewhat of a desktop cloud app and also a web application. I've even heard of like Balsamic Mobile, which I'm really excited about, because I'm like, oh, I could just be driving my car, designing, not paying attention where I'm going. And
That would be quite a user experience.
Yes. Well, if I can get Siri on board and she can just design for me, I'm game for it. But I know they have like Jira integration. I know Jira is a widely used project management system. So, in my opinion, Balsamic if you can swing it, but Mockflow if you're broke.
And Josh, what's your recent experience been, and I don't know if it applies to your current environment, but working with or partnering, quote unquote, partnering with developers through that lean process?
Developers are there every step of the way, because it gives them a good, understanding of the product from the ground up, just like the project managers and the scrum masters and everybody. So everybody has a stake in this. Your developers will be like, hey, that's an awesome feature, but you can't send every user a free puppy. It's just not reasonable. I'm like,
still playing devil's advocate.
yeah, And that, I think in that role, that's where the user experience professional needs to be that voice of reason. You take in everybody's suggestions, you put them down on the board, and then you come to a middle ground about the product and what you can do with the product.
Have you seen also a driving increase in the partnership between UX and the actual business? You mentioned earlier that it's currently me, myself, and I as the analyst in the role. But how much exposure are you getting from the end user community when you're looking at these projects?
I'd say the engagement rates are really high.
Is it during mostly the beginning, or are you having to go back and update personas or get more personas?
Well, see, that's the thing is personas should, at the very beginning of your process, personas, no matter what you're using, whether it's Lean UX, Agile UX, or any type of UX process, you have to have personas, and they're going to evolve. The Kitchen Cloud project that we're working on, the personas themselves, I like to tell people I get to play D&D for a living, so I get to make fake characters up and give them attributes.
Oh, you too?
Yeah. But I know CJ would laugh at me because I'd give them entire backstories, like this is where she went to college. So that tells them the exact reasons and decisions that she makes now, and like this is what her mother did when she was a child. So it's really understanding the human behavior and the psychology of the user research that we gathered and filtered down and created those personas on. And the personas themselves, they can evolve and change. Like I think one of our personas is Chad something. He was a grad student, had a girlfriend, wanted to learn how to cook. So, in comes our application that suggests recipes, easy to cook recipes, things like this. But it's been going on a year now, and he already knows how to cook. He enjoys cooking. He wants to get a little more, experiment with his cooking and things like that. So that's how that persona evolves over time. And everybody is involved in that process, but I believe it's the role of the user experience professional to really be that voice, to be the leader in that cause. Yes.
You had mentioned before about those rapid prototyping frameworks like Bootstrap and Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Have you worked at all with there's a Balsamic add-on or extension, a NAPKey, NAPKEE?
I can't say that I have.
So what it does is it hooks into Balsamic, mockups, the VMML files, and will export Bootstrap files, HTML files. They just went free. I forget exactly when. So instead of it being another additional cost on top of Balsamic, it's a free plugin. So to be able to kind of just connect the dots between the mockups, those presentations, and then getting to those rapid prototypes even faster. And maintaining the fidelity to what was approved in the mockups.
Well, that definitely make my job a lot easier.
And it kind of like, once again, like you're talking about demystifying it, being able to get developer buy-in early on, because you're showing, hey, this is the path to your working code, instead of before where it used to just be, here's a PSD, make this work.
Oh yeah, no, I'm familiar with that, and I'm gonna go back to the Kitchen Cloud project that we've been working on. I had visual designs for every screen that have gone through 3 iterations, but it's been one of those projects I'm like, I can get to it when I get to it. It's not really my full-time job, but it's a labor of love at this point. And then recently I started looking into Framework 7 for mobile. It basically recreates the iOS experience through mobile web, and then I can visit the site on mobile. We gave it a specific URL, and then I can save it to my home screen. So now it actually works like a legitimate application. I can sit there and rapid prototype in that. And I probably take like an hour to 2 hours every night just working on that and refining things. And there also comes a point where I like Lean UX where you're not sitting here and you're staring at the same screen for 2 days. You're like, I know I can improve this, and you obsess over it, and you move that one thing 1 pixel to the left, and then you move it back to the right, and you move it back to the left, because then your project manager is going to step in and be like, hey, you're eating up your hours. What's going on? So, it's the constant communication and things like this. I'm on Skype all day, every day. The only reason I'm not on Skype now is because I'm here.
Actually, you are on.
I'm on Skype.
Kind of a Skype
It's
thing.
they figured out how to do it into my head, so I'm carrying on 18 different conversations at the moment. But the constant communication, the constant feedback. Like if I'm working on something, like hey, I'm working on this thing. It looks good on my end, but I'm going to throw it to you guys, see what you think. Just that type of communication is invaluable. Any other questions?
Books.
Books.
Books you recommend?
Well,
Not the Facebook.
not Facebook. I don't recommend Facebook to anybody. Actually, I've been thinking about getting rid of my Facebook. Other words, so I'm turning the UX Manifesto into an actual book. That's been a task and a half because I hate writing. So that's why I'm a big fan of Lean UX. But I don't know when it's going to get done because I've got 80 gajillion other projects ahead of that. But I'll let everybody know when it's finished so you can like point and laugh and like, oh, there's a typo. I wrote this myself. You can never go wrong with Don't Make Me Think, Steve Krug. Let's see. They had some O'Reilly books. They're pretty good. Mobile web design and mobile design from O'Reilly. There was a I can't remember her name. I'll share it with CJ and Evan after the talk and everything. But there was a small little book. It was on UI design. I don't want to say her name because this is being recorded and I'm afraid I'm going to butcher it and get a phone call. But it's a small little book. I remember I waited at Barnes & Noble for like 2 weeks for it just because I wanted to see what was in it. And it's basically the same thing I'm trying to do with the UX Manifesto. Only difference is it sort of seemed like a manifesto a little bit at a time. I was just like, well, here it is. The pages are all tea-stained and it's typewritten.
What's the spelling of the name?
The spelling of the name? It's UX Manifesto and a Practical Guide to Usability. It's not anywhere yet. It's still in my typewriter.
No, you were saying about this person's name.
Oh, I don't know her last name because it's French.
What's her first name? Sorry.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Her first name is Jenny. I know that much.
Oh.
But I'll share it after this and everything. Actually, you know what? That's the amazing thing about the internet. Let's go on an adventure together.
I picked up a book a few weeks ago. It was the UX designer team of one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really good. So, once again, what's validating the position itself, the need for the time and resources.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful. And then also the Doodle Revolution.
Okay.
And like you were talking about, just the notebook, right?
Yeah.
Where people are switching, maybe they're finding their passion in UX and sketching and not knowing where to start. And being able to have those info doodles during meetings and being able to capture that stuff. Like you said, those different images that you're in your notebook that only you may understand or make something make sense to you, but still it's a way to drive home really important concepts in a way that you'll never forget.
Oh yeah, no, CJ and I have spent many a night poring over my notebook. I was like, this is what I had in mind. Mm-hmm. And then Amazon beat us to the punch with Amazon Fresh. I was just like, groceries directly into your house. That's what I want because I'm lazy. I'm not going to lie. I work all day. I'm tired. I'm lazy. I want groceries directly to my house without me having to think about it. So I want to eliminate the process of barcode scanning. And I know that's a major privacy concern. Like, oh, Publix just saw your shopping list and saw that you needed milk. We'll be at your house in 5 minutes with milk. I'm like, awesome, I can eat cereal. But, yeah.
Earlier you were mentioning project managers and scrum masters.
Mhm.
So if you're working in an environment that doesn't have scrum masters,
Okay.
Actually, can a project manager be a scrum master, or do
Yes.
you need a scrum master just dedicated scrum master?
Yeah. I mean, either or. I've worked in situations where the scrum master is the designer and the project manager and the developer and everything. I've worked in situations where they're like, oh, you're the user experience designer, but now you're the scrum master at the same time. I want you to lead, the project and see where we're going and stuff like that. So depending on the situation, one person can wear many hats. It just depends on how many people you have on your team. It's not, and Scrum Master, that's more of an agile development term. So it really depends on which sort of method you're attacking this with. But I wouldn't say they're absolutely necessary. I mean, I'm here, I've eaten on a regular basis, and I haven't had many Scrum Masters, so.
How, kind of to play off of that, run with that question, how much do you really see like the different roles kind of interchanging and like one person really kind of doing one in particular or something like that, like as a designer and a developer?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Once again, it depends on the resources and the environment. I've been UX, UI, and I'm like, I don't want to do development work, But at the same time, I understand the constraints that they have. I do feel that it is a very good thing for a designer to have this front-end skills, at least HTML, CSS, and jQuery. So that's why they can actually take their ideas from design, sketch, whatever, and put them into a prototype or reality. But usually, in instances like that, the roles don't interchange a lot. I have seen Java developers become tech leads out of nowhere. That's a different story. There's not enough bourbon for that story.
Sounds like a challenge.
And I mean, but when it comes to teams, working in teams and things like that, you don't see it interchange a whole lot.
So you don't see, what I'm curious about is like the researchers in particular, and like how much do they really, and how much have you in your experience dealt with researchers and all?
Okay.
I'm kind of curious too about personas too.
Yeah. Okay. You need to be, if you're in a situation where you have a business analyst or a researcher you're working with and you're not playing both that role of the researcher and designer, you got to become best buddies with that person. You have to be best friends with that business analyst because you both go into the same situation. You're both gathering requirements, but he's the person, or he or she is responsible for coming up with like the matrix and the user stories and different things like this. So it's, a little bit of documentation on there, and most of the BA job is documentation and making sure that original vision is helped carried through along with the Scrum Master or Project Manager. So then, as they're creating that matrix of user requirements, user stories, and different things like this, that's when you can come through with your design and be like, okay, well, let's pair whatever screen we're working on in the product with the user story. So this way we have a roadmap from A to Z. Here's the story explaining why this feature exists.
Oh, and by the way, I've been playing the next edition of D&D. Like the beta testing for it.
Oh no, we got a PS3 and my productivity's gone out the window.
That relationship there with like the BA, what do you like to get from them basically where their process ends and your process begins?
What I like to do is, so say you're starting a project, you both go in and get the user requirements. You understand what the stakeholder wants from it. I take on more of a role gathering, maybe if at all possible, like user feedback, if there's any at all. If it's a new product, of course, there's going to be any user feedback. So I'll take that time to do like research, different conventions, things like this, sketching and design. Like they'll come up with user stories, and basically that back and forth to make sure that our stories are consistent across the board, and somebody might be able to poke one hole into the overall process of what we're building or one of our stories, However, that's only one hole, and we can backpedal on that a little bit and take care of that hole and just explain exactly what we're doing every point of the way. But yeah, I sketch a lot. Like I said, I never go anywhere without my notebook. So I'll take the time, do my research, sketch out some ideas, and then they'll feed me like a user story or something like that. And then I can okay, well, here's this user story. How are we going to tackle this need of our users? So you start sketching up that idea, and that's the way it goes. And then you share the sketch. So that's why I said you really need to build that strong relationship with a user researcher or a BA. Yes.
All right, so I think you just picked my brain, so I'm going to pick yours back. You keep referring back to the researcher, the business analyst, and pure UI or user experience areas. That's something that obviously there's been a huge lack of. First off, we can talk about the relationship between developers and designers, their lack of, and of course the increasing need for that relevance now. I think the overall population of IT has seen the need for that and understands that there is a need for that. But one thing I haven't really seen is the actual presence of a business analyst or researcher with the UX group only. So I guess I'm opening up a big question here, but is this researcher or business analyst strictly working with the UX group taking these personas, or are they actually working with the development team as well?
I think the role of the VA should be product defined, so it's not specifically UX or development. I feel like they're gonna be that person to create the bridge between the two at times.
Right.
If you're not already communicating. So this way, I think of like Indiana Jones, right? Awesome. You're running down the cave and everything, and the boulder's coming after you. Well, guess what? Your BA and those user stories and everything that you make sure you cover your butt on, as far as the design is concerned, and it matches well with the user stories. So this way you can deliver them to the developers, and the developers are understanding everything that's going on. They're going to be that wall to hold the boulder in place. But I believe that BA's role spans both development and design and user experience.
Cool. No, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think you're right. It goes back to the actual product, and they need to be stable to that and hold that vision for the team and keep them kind of within those guidelines through the cycle of development. I know that, I think it was your question earlier, do you need a Scrum Master present separately from your project manager? And I really think, the answer is absolutely no. But every environment that you walk into is going to be different.
Yeah.
And it depends on, like you said, the resources you have, especially cash flow and headcount. Because I work with companies that have 5 employees that you've mentioned plenty of examples of. It's me, myself, and I. They're the researcher going out and meeting the personas, the end users. And then there are other, the Everbanks of the world where they have the UX team rolled up under marketing that's completely separate from IT.
Yep.
So it could be a disparate, it could be an ideal, it could be you don't have a choice.
Yeah, and I think that's the situation I'm in currently right now, where I'm part of this content team, but I'm specifically focused on that user experience design of that content, where we have multiple, well, I'm planning hopefully to get more UX people and things like this, because the UI designer and we want to place UX people in every department, even sales. So this way, because I know that sales comes to me a lot and be like, hey, we want to sell this capability. We want to learn more about this. How are we doing this? And not really, maybe not possibly putting a UX person in sales, but building that strong connection there with sales so they understand what we're capable of, what we can do, and so they can better understand everything.
Awesome. That's a great idea.
Yes.
What are some of the testing tools you use for your UX?
QuickTime. Face-to-face interviews, you can't beat them. That is if you have the option to do a face-to-face interviews. I've done over-the-phone interviews. I've done interviews with people I know that work in the same industry on a different project. So like say it's a banking project. Okay, well I know like my aunt's son works at a bank or something. What are some of the issues that he's seeing from a standpoint? Different things like that. But like as far as tools and stuff, I've used Silverback just because I got a Mac and I wanted to try it out. There's several remote other testing tools out there. There's, of course, for remote usability testing, it sort of throws a wide net over usability testing, is usabilityhub.com. They're free to sign up and everything, but you get like 5-second tests and feedback in it, A/B tests. You can ask questions and different things like that. That was one of the tools I think I first started using when they came out. Seems like forever ago, but they've really stepped up their game with what they can deliver. Yes.
Is there an average runtime for an A/B test?
I wouldn't say so, but I wouldn't let it run more than maybe a day or two.
I guess I should have rephrased it. As far as how many people or maybe you're using as test cases?
Yeah. I usually like to do odd numbers just because even numbers irritate me. And they usually come to draws like, oh, everybody likes this, great. I'm more excited when somebody hates something I do, because then I can talk to that person, I can pick their brain, I'm like, what do you hate about it? And that's another thing about, over the years, letting things go. You can't please everybody all the time. So I like to go with odd numbers because then you have that tiebreaker if something happens. So I usually do 5 to 7 people, maybe even 9, depending on, what the project needs.
Like with large scale applications, not necessarily like marketing websites that have basically unique pages on everything, do you find yourself like more or less doing wireframes or mocking up basically every part of the application, or is there a brand that you just kind of say, here's the look and feel, here's how it should be, style wise? And
I think as far as that's concerned, wireframes are the way to go on that, just because with that much minute detail in large applications like that, you're going to get lost in PSDs and mockups for days. So having wireframes to that degree, and then having a branding guideline helps a lot. Say like, oh, we're going to put a button here according to the wireframe, but according to our branding guideline, this is how a button's supposed to look. So I think that definitely fills in the gap depending on the scale of the operation, I'd say probably shave a couple days, because you don't really have to do PSD mockups or anything like that. Yes.
How long does it take you to really get a grip on user experience?
Well, it's been a long, strange journey. I have a traditional education in animation, but my father was a psychologist, so that explains a lot about what I do.
And how does that make you feel?
Makes me feel
How do you feel about your mother?
Oh yeah, that was an interesting topic at the dinner table. But I spent a number of years actually studying human behavior because I like to tackle it from, let's say, a personal, practical psychology standpoint. So no matter what we do in life, there are certain behaviors we can't escape. We all need clothing. We all have certain needs. We need food. We need water. Well, what can I learn about that person to give them exactly what they need? How are they going to go about it? And that's why I love doing user research and things. I see it like anthropology, learning more about a culture and things like that. Just for giggles, I'd like to get lost in Japan, maybe for 3 weeks, and come back with one less kidney. But I would learn so much about that culture in 3 weeks, it'd be ridiculous. And then I'd be like, okay, well, if I have any Japanese clients, I know certain cultural things that need to take place. I understand certain behavioral patterns that they have. I want to learn more about this person, more about the stakeholder. Not on a personal level, like, hey, take me home with you, introduce me to the dog, let's go to your kids' play, and things like that. But even touching that on a surface, just a surface, is going to help you out so much. So understanding like basic human behavior and different things like this. And because we're now a generation, I remember when there was no internet. I was happy. Everybody was happy. Like, I got to go outside and see the sun. That was amazing. I miss doing that. But now we have an entire generation of users that don't remember a life without the internet. So that's part of their behavioral, manifestation as they move forward. Like some people don't even imagine life without the internet. You have people with internet withdrawals and things like this.
Well, that's a cultural shift.
Yeah, I got a whole generation that's being brought up with the internet in their hands at all times too. That's gonna be a big one.
I'll quote Futurama. I don't want to live on this planet anymore. And that's why, just me personally, I like to take it old school with some things if I can. So I have that traditional advertising background. If I can do something with my hands, I'd much rather prefer to do that. If I can do it just as quick and meet the needs. But yeah, it's all about understanding that basic psychology behind it. And there are tons of articles out there on psychology and web-driven psychology and decision-making and things like this. And that's where the Steve Krug book comes into place. Don't Make Me Think. Because 5-second testing, of course, you've got 5 seconds before that person makes a decision whether or not they want to continue into your content. I like to call it 6 seconds because you have the 1 second where they're not looking at the screen. So, any other questions? I'll take personal questions. I don't care.
You talked before about Chrome being the perfect browser, happiness, happy.
For the designer, yes.
So what type of add-ins or plugins do you like to use?
None. Really, I keep it very simple. I use the web inspector that's in there if I need to debug anything. I like to use Evernote Clip because I'll find interesting things, save it to Evernote. That's about it. Everything else is just sort of for my own personal use. Saving things to my Kindle. I like this song, I want to save it. And that's another thing too. I like listening to the music that other designers listen to while they work, because I know some people work in complete silence. Some people, have certain tracks that they like listening. Some people, all they listen to when they work is dubstep. I had to stop working with a person just because I didn't like dubstep. But that was, once again, that was personal reasons. Nothing against that person. I just didn't enjoy her taste in music. And I've also been told to turn down my headphones quite often. Apparently I listen to jazz too loud. But everybody has music. Everybody has, it goes back to behavior. What's a learned behavior? What's an innate behavior? Things like that.
What are some of the productivity tools you use? Do you use Windows or you obviously use Mac?
I use Windows and Mac. The only reason I use Windows is because I do my fair share of 3D work. And that's primarily what I'm working on now is, working in that art sector, doing a lot of 3D stuff, getting back to grassroots on that. But I use Mac just because it's, for design, I think it's superior. With the Retina display and everything like this. I'm like, oh, I can design something and it's going to look like I want it to look like, and it's not going to be dull. The colors are going to be nice and sharp and exactly true to form. As far as that's concerned, I use Jira a lot for project management, Confluence if I share anything. I use a CRM called Base. It's a free tool. It's been great, especially when you're going out on your own and you have to keep track of all this money coming in, things like this. And they're like, oh, hey, I haven't talked to that person in a month, and they asked me to get back to them 3 weeks ago. It's great for reminding you need to talk to that person. So that's one that I like to use. I use Asana a lot. It's a free task management application, but they've been more adapted into project management. So you can assign tasks, you can like tasks, you can add, it integrates with Harvest and different things like this. My biggest thing when it comes to my productivity tools is I'm not always at my desk. I'm not always going to be in front of my computer, so I can get it on my phone or my tablet at the same time. That's going to be a big thing for me.
What's the name of that one you said?
Asana.
Asana.
A-S-A-N-A.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll actually choose tools based on their design,
Yeah.
just because I'm weird like that.
I think most people do though.
Yeah.
That's why design's so important.
Any personal questions? I like
You have
walks
an
on
art
the
background?
beach. Huh?
You have an art background?
Yeah. I originally did animation and 3D animation in college and everything, and that was sort of like my first job getting out of college. I've done some work with a couple of studios for motion pictures, things like that. User experience design actually started when I was in college, and I was like, hey, I have all these student loans. I need a way to make money fast. So I started doing website design. And then I got more interested in it. And I was like, okay, I understand that I put this button here, put this body of text here, but I want to understand why. Why am I making these decisions? And that's what really got me interested in user experience. And I was like, I was studying these things without really actually knowing that they were user experience. I just thought they were standard practice, that everybody knew this. And that's what got me into user experience. And now it's come full circle. I'm still sort of doing user experience, but I'm focused more on like infographic things. I'm working on an infographic right now where we're serving up the information in the infographic, and the print portion that we're delivering is going to be an old graphic noir film poster. So you can hang it up in your office. It's got the man and the lady on front, but it has all the points. And then what we're delivering to the web, of course, is going to be that motion graphic animation. So we're actually creating a movie based off of the infographic. And that ties back into that user experience. Yes.
I was wondering, have you worked with Photoshop and ExtendScript for like data-driven images, where you're able to actually create that layout, that template, and then kind of just see what it would look like with this information, and kind of just think about rapid prototypes?
Yeah. I can't say that I have. As the years keep moving on and on, Photoshop's become less of a more important tool in design. I only use it now if I have to do photo manipulations or things like that. I remember way back when Photoshop was the only design tool you had. But there's tons of Photoshop plugins. I haven't used any of the ones like you were talking about that create the layouts, but I used to be heavy into WordPress development. So I rapidly spread out a WordPress theme. We're like, okay, pay me. And one tool that really helped with that is called, I forgot the name of the plugin. It's going to come to me soon. But basically what it does is it takes the layout that you made in Photoshop and slices it all up and creates a PHP WordPress theme out of the Photoshop mockup. So that's been invaluable as far as that. But then I'm the kind of person, I'm that UX UI. I like to get into the code and see what I can fiddle with, if I can improve that interaction, things like that. I know that Illustrator now supports SVG images, which is a big thing with everybody wanting to be responsive. Yes.
How has your process changed over the years as user interfaces have changed? Especially now as we're going more mobile and different type of prototyping and things like that, and all the different tools and capabilities that are given to you.
Well, I definitely think that there are all these different type of processes out there. You talk about content first, which is currently what I'm working in with my job and everything. But you start thinking about mobile first strategies if you're going to be delivering that thing to mobile or desktop, or what's going on with that. So I like to design mobile first if we have a mobile product, and then scale out from there. But that, I'd say that's the only thing that's really changed, other than me just waking up in the morning and sitting down and making some flash animations. Like, I'm done. Yes.
I guess in your experience with dealing with animations, do you see more people using like HTML5 animation more than Flash animation and doing like intense animation.
If they're doing intense animation, they shouldn't be using either of those. If they're actually doing animation. Now, if they're serving up basic like UI animations, maybe like a button glowing or something moving, I would suggest jQuery, just because it's more sturdy. A lot of the HTML5, even though HTML5's been out for years now, still a lot of it's not supported, and we have to concern ourselves with the legacy browsers like Internet 8 and 7, and I want to say 6, but 6
and 9 and 10.
Yeah, and Firefox. I hate Firefox. That's another story.
Why is that?
Why?
I don't hear that very well.
I hate Firefox. I have my reasons. Firefox and I have a history.
Took a while to get off there, but I don't like it anymore. And I found lots of quirks with it when developing for it, and it's becoming the new IE, really.
Going back to that language selector, this is one of my quarrels with Firefox. Is I'm like, oh, awesome! It works in Chrome, it works in IE, it works in Safari. Why won't it work in Firefox? It'll translate the content, but it won't change the labels or the context text. So what's going on? So that's currently what I'm debugging now. So I'm not a big fan of Firefox, although I understand it is very developer friendly. Any other questions? It took me 2 hours to get here.
We appreciate it.
I like long walks on the beach.
Do you ever use tools like, I don't know what the new term is, but Adobe like Shadow, or where you'd actually be able to see what your design would look like on multiple devices at the same time?
There was Adobe Edge, and then it changed into something else. One of those Adobe Lab products. I've used that one in the past with the rapid prototyping and everything like that. And now, especially working with the rapid prototype of Kitchen Cloud project, I like to just upload it to the FTP server, and like boom, there's the prototype right there. I can test it physically on the device, but now that I have a Mac and everything like that, there are tons of desktop-based testing tools as well for that. And I mean, if I don't want to use my phone because Mac and everything, I can just pull up the iPhone tester on the screen and automatically have a test from a local IP address.
Chrome also allows you to do that. You can emulate any device you want on there, not just through resizing, but it'll actually switch the whole emulator and everything and emulate like 20, 30 different devices. It's actually a really good development tool because it does it all, really.
Yeah. I promise this talk is not about Chrome.
Disappear here.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you have any experience in doing game development, just pure JavaScript, HTML?
I wrote an entire series for Developer Drive called HTML5 Canvas for Beginners. It's a 6-part series talking about HTML5 Canvas and the things that you can do with JavaScript and that. So I've seen people create RPG-based games out of that, task-driven games, things like this. And that was all done in an effort to sort of get away from using Flash as in the animation go-to, because Steve Jobs, as much as I think he was a cult leader, he was a pretty ingenious designer. And the fact of the matter was, oh, now the majority of the world is using my device. You know what? I've never liked Flash. I don't want to support it on the iPhones. So that prompted that shift away from Flash. Now, Flash itself is still, I'm a Flash evangelist. That's how I started. But that's gearing itself more towards away from the web and mobile stuff and more towards desktop applications. They've even released things like Flash Catalyst and Flash Builder for desktop applications. And I think, was it CS5 that they started, you could sit here and write everything in Flash and have it put out to an iPhone application? Yeah.
Like Adobe Air and all that stuff to
Yeah.
support it for all the different clients, and just basically became more and more like Java.
Yeah. So I'm not saying stay away from Flash, but stay away from Flash.
Unless it's the move.
Yeah.
What was that series called? HTML5?
Let's see if they actually have it up. And that was years ago.
You were looking for that book, right?
Yes. I believe since then, Web Designers Depot has bought them out. So, well, there's part 4 at least. But and originally when this was written, this was when HTML5 Canvas was the new thing. So I'm sure by this point, you know, it's well evolved past what I'd originally written. And you're just seeing a lot of cool experiments, people doing awesome things with it. So, of course. Let's go to part 4. See if there's anything cool in that. Oh yes, image manipulation with Canvas was a fun one. So this was originally a colored image, and then you can turn it black and white. So now, basically what this is doing here is, say you have a photo application. It's a mobile app, but now you're accessing things that you would be able to target within a native device. One of the biggest things I just nerded over that I called CJ up, I was so proud of myself, was the ability to access the camera from a mobile web application. Because I remember when all of this started, you couldn't do that. If you were mobile web, you had to make a decision whether you were mobile, web, or native mobile. And I'm like, oh, well, I can just prototype everything in Framework 7, and we don't have to touch C, Objective-C or anything, because I refuse to learn iOS development. I can't wrap my head around that. But you can do a lot of cool things with Canvas. Mr. Doob. So these are all HTML5 Canvas animations. Different things like type, the Google Easter eggs when it would fall down and crash. Rendering realistic clouds and things like that. So you actually get that zoom and scale and a blur effect at the same time, so it's creating a depth of field. And I think one of the things that came from this that started was is everybody familiar with parallax scrolling? Okay, so this is sort of a precursor to parallax scrolling, and nowadays you probably just do this with a parallax scroll and not have to worry about it. But, oh, here it is. So this is all HTML5. The balls are probably actually made with CSS3 using border radius, and then you can actually pick them up and toss them around, and it has the physics behind it written in JavaScript. If that's all, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I heard there was pizza.